family, and not scared of a conflict, and we're not scared. We're not running. We're coming at him.
Well, good afternoon, friends. I hope everybody's doing well. So we've got another afternoon session with Alex Murdaugh. What do you guys think? Is it interesting finding out about the financial stuff that he's been into? Because he's been into a lot. And do you think that that whole damn place is shady as shit? I'd love to know your opinion. Because he's been up to no good for a long freaking time. So my printer came in. Oh, look at this one. Beauty. Printer came in. Now I'm trying to figure out how to set the damn thing up, but I will get it figured. Oh, okay. That's really interesting. My Mexi friend. You'll have to give me a shout. Because something tells me if you're doing it, I probably will do it. So I think we've only got 5 minutes. I tried to get on earlier yet, but I got busy with that damn printer. Well, hello, Shauna. Good to see you, friend. What do you think about all this financial stuff that's coming out? I think it's the bomb. I was just saying, I think the whole damn crew is shady as shit. There's a lot of explaining to do the way I see things. Sorry, just getting comfy. I'm a cross-leg sitter. Yeah. There's been no good happening out there. What's this one doing? What's she doing? She was kind of rolling back and forth. Was she digging with her beak? I honestly can't believe he thought he was going to get away with that substantial amount of theft. And you know what, friend? Look at the people he was taking it from. I mean, his friends, that's bad enough. But then you start looking at some of these people that were, oh my goodness, didn't have a chance of understanding what was going on and trusted him and his shady little friend there. Sounds like he's still dealing with a lot as well as far as the courts go. But I really am hoping that this blows up that whole damn firm, because I don't think he's the only one that's been doing shady shit. And then there's his brother. I don't know if he's still there. It sounded like it by what she said. But I've also heard that he's no longer there. So that too would be interesting. She's just beautiful. I don't know. I want to look for your babies too, because they were really getting mischievous as well. Let me see here if I can. I always like looking at your area too. Yeah. Let's look at yours too. Oh. Oh my goodness. I am so not ready. Good God, Martha. Come on. Oh my God. Why? There we go. Hopefully that's better. So far behind to this afternoon, I think I'm last. So, have I got everything running? That's going. That's going, that's going, that's going. Yeah, I've been talking to myself for a little while. Not the first time. Sure, it won't be the last. But yeah, I'll be very interested in the charges that he gets because he's got more than Alec does. And what I was wondering about is all of these feathers. So, if I remember correctly, eagles do hunt other birds, don't they? Look at this guy. Very healthy. Just stretch my wings. Too adorable. Nothing happening in court. I think they're a little late, are they not? Yeah. Okay. I don't know what was going on there, but let's see. Damn.
I want to make it clear that if I said that, I never implied that our South Carolina court reporters would produce such a deficit product. Yes. It was made clear to me by court administration that it's, what's the name of the company? FDR?
Muting
FDR.
out.
FDR, a private company. Private company name either, so. Apparently has not perfected its software because we paid $450 for something that was, as you saw, not of much use. So I want to make the record clear, not our South Carolina reporters, some northern company.
Certainly, Ms. Harris and I have been working together for probably a decade, and I've worked with Mike as well, and they're excellent court reporters. Okay, ready for the jury? Okay, you bring them in.
One of the things that I discussed with the defense, and we had mentioned to Your Honor before, is, there's some issues that surround the side of the road, and we're not, plowing that ground currently, with the understanding with the defense that if that becomes an issue as the trial goes forward, that there won't be any objection to recalling a witness for that limited purpose. And I just want to put that on the record before we go forward.
100% in agreement, Your Honor.
Very good. Thank you. You bring the jury.
This is their audio, not mine. Sitting on a leather seat. Just want to let you know. So how many people do you think he's going to stare down now?
Thank you. Let me call your next witness.
Please, Court, Your Honor, State Calls Ronnie Crosby.
Raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. Do you affirm the testimony about to give report in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name again for the record as you take the witness stand. Spell your last name, please.
Ronnie Crosby, Crosby.
Mr. Crosby, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
Fair enough. Tell the jury what your profession is, please.
I'm an attorney.
And where do you, what, do you work for a particular firm?
I do. I work for currently for Parker Law Group.
All right. And before it was Parker Law Group, did that firm have a different name?
It did. It was Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Ellsroth, and Dietrich. I've heard it referred to as PMED in here earlier today. So
You know the defendant, Alec Murdaugh?
I do.
You see him here in the courtroom?
I do.
Can you point him out to the jury?
He is seated at defense table between Mr. Hartpootly and Mr. Griffin. I believe he has a blue blazer on.
Your Honor, can the record reflect he's identified the defendant?
It does.
When it was still PMPD, did Alec Murdaugh, was he a partner in the law firm that you were part of?
He was.
And as a result of Mr. Murdaugh's actions, is that law firm kind of changed its name now to Parker? Or is that one of the reasons? Or how would you explain that?
Well, yes, as a result of the actions that you heard about earlier today, we did change not only the name of the law firm, but to a separate legal entity.
How long have you been with, and let's just go back and call it PMPD before all of this happened. How long had you been with PMPD?
I started in the summer of '94, so almost 30 years now.
And when did you first get to know the defendant?
Sometime in the late '90s. I probably met him before then when I was working as a clerk for a judge, Judge Smoke, whose picture's here in the courtroom. And probably met him in court, but met him, really think I started getting to know him at the time of his grandfather, his grandfather's death,
Okay.
which would have been in the late '90s.
And what was his grandfather's name?
Randolph Murdaugh Jr. or the second, and he went by the nickname of Buster.
Was Buster in the law firm as well?
He was there when I started. He would come into the office. Yeah, he was there. I don't think he was a principal or any kind of equity partner, but he was there. Yes.
Over the years, did you become a partner in the firm?
I did.
And what year do you recall becoming a partner in the firm? Roughly.
I would say somewhere around 99 to 2000.
And did the defendant become a partner in the firm as well?
Yes, he came to work sometime in the late '90s, early 2000, and would become a partner probably somewhere around 2004, 2005.
He's been your law partner up until 2021 from that time?
That's correct.
Just real quick before we move on, under the agreement that the partners had, what is the rule as it relates to fees that a partner earns during the course of the year?
All fees belong to the law firm.
And just very quickly, explain to the jury very quickly just the compensation. Is most of the compensation for a partner received during the year or in one lump sum at the end of the year?
Well, as Ms. Seconder laid out earlier, we receive a salary, and then at the end of the year, we divide net profits, which would generally be a larger portion of your income, although not always. Sometimes, depending on how someone's year went, you may not get anything as a bonus at the end of the year if your work did not generate sufficient fees to overcome the amount of overhead expenses that was assigned to the individual attorney.
Generally, though, most of the compensation is in that end of the year bonus.
That's fair to say.
Was that the case to your understanding for Alec?
Well, not just Alec, but it was for all of us.
So your observation over the years, did Alec had a relatively lucrative practice?
Yes, he did. He had up and down years like all people who do plaintiff's work, but yeah, he was had a lot of good clientele.
Some years he would get bonuses of 6 and 7 figures, to your recollection?
Yes, he could.
If a lawyer were to do legal work while a partner in the firm and have those fees, if he was sharing a case with another lawyer and had the lawyer issue those fees directly to that lawyer instead of the firm, what would that be?
Mr. Waters, I was fooling with this microphone and I may have missed a nuance in your question. Could you ask that again? I apologize. Trying to quit leaning, but apparently I can't stretch it out any further.
Is it common in plaintiffs' cases for lawyers, let's say within the firm, or lawyers within the firm and lawyers outside of the firm to share cases?
Yes, I'd do that probably 70% of my practices with other law firms.
And in that instance, do you have to split the fee in the event there's a recovery by settlement or trial?
Yes, there's if there's a recovery up front before when the case begins, the work begins, there's an agreement on how the fee's going to be split with the other law firm. Sometimes there may be multiple law firms in a given case.
And are there instances then when the other law firm is responsible for dispersing the money, including dispersing the fees to PMPED?
Yes, that happens quite often.
And if a lawyer in PMPED were to have those fees made out to him or her instead of the firm, what would that be?
Well, it would be against our policy, but it would be stealing the fees from the firm if they did not come to the firm because they belong to the law firm.
Let me ask you a little bit about the defendant himself. What's your observation of the defendant's cell phone usage?
Oh, he was somebody who used his cell phone a lot. I mean, much more than I do. He was always on his cell phone.
And describe a little bit about your observations of him as a lawyer. What were his skills as a lawyer? What was he good at?
Elliot was a very good lawyer. He was good with people. Strategizing against insurance companies and opposing lawyers that ultimately got oftentimes results that the lawyers in the firm would be really amazed at what a good job he was able to do.
Was he good at understanding the emotional value of a case and being able to leverage that?
Yes, I mean, that goes hand in hand with what I just said. It is very much a strength that he had.
Was he a good technical lawyer? Did he have a lot of academic and technical skills as a lawyer?
Well, I'm not going to judge his intelligence because I think he's very intelligent. As far as being a real student of the law, probably wasn't, and never developed a technical expertise like some lawyers will. Some lawyers specialize in one thing like medical malpractice, and that's all they do, but he didn't. He was more of a general practitioner.
Around the time of the recession, back 2008, 2009, 2010, did you ever have any conversations with the defendant and gain a general understanding of his financial condition at that time?
I did.
And tell the jury what that was, please.
Well, for a number of years, Barrett and one of his non-lawyer business, Alec and one of his non-lawyer business partners, a guy named Barrett Boulware, they did a lot of real estate transactions, just buying land and speculating on it. And I think leading up to that, they had purchased some property that speculating that they could sell it, maybe some developmental property. And of course, we all know what happened in 2008, 2009. That market went bad, and I think both Barrett as well as maybe some of the other partners did not have the financial ability to deal with those loans that they had financed it, and so I think Alec was having to carry a lot of that, and it put a strain on him financially.
At some point after that, to your discussions with him and to your knowledge of the cases in the firm, did he have some big cases that you thought had rectified that strain, that financial strain?
Yes, there was a string of rather large cases. Some of them I actually worked on with him that resulted in very large settlements. That would have been my understanding, would have certainly been sufficient to rectify that, as well as I believe ultimately some of that property that was causing a strain was they were able to sell it. So long answer, yeah, yes.
And what were some of those cases that you thought at least had rectified any financial issues that he had?
A case referred to as Plyler, and these are internally the way we refer to them. Pinckney, which also had a companion case, Thomas. I think the Plyler case was actually 4 cases, but we referred to it as one. And then he had a case called Badger, and those cases would have been large cases.
And that's from your understanding that the legitimate legal fees from those cases were very, very large.
Yes, the law firm earned, and subsequently Mr. Murdaugh would have earned good income off those cases.
Are you generally familiar with what's called the boat case?
Yes.
And is that the February 2019 boat wreck in which Miss Mallory Beach was killed?
Yes, Ms. Beach actually worked for my wife.
Somebody you knew?
Yeah, and I knew her as well as the other girls and knew Paul.
As a result of that boat case, was it your understanding that the defendant had been civilly sued as a result of that?
Yes, there was a lawsuit brought against Alec and others.
Moving on from the boat case, did you ever have any conversation with, after the boat case, did you have any conversation with Alec about structuring his fees in a particular case?
That conversation had come up around the office with not only him, but other lawyers over the years. To my knowledge, I was the only to ever do that, but he did. Sometime in the spring of 2021, he had a conversation with.
Okay. And what was the comment with it?
I think it was just me, how it was, done, whether I thought it was a good idea, what the process was, that type of thing. And I don't recall the very specifics, but I do recall telling him that given the low interest rates, that it wouldn't be very fruitful if you had high interest rates and you can buy into a locked in on an annuity. It would make sense, but there were pretty much zero interest rates during that time.
When you made that, did he
And he was thinking about
You mentioned that you're actually the only one in the firm that you recall doing structuring some fees. Is that correct?
yes, and I think that that's a fact, not just that I recall.
And though you actually set up a real structure, correct?
Well, yeah, I did.
All right. You didn't just divert the fees into another account and spend them, correct?
No, and to clarify, and I think Ms. Seconder touched on it, was the traditional way of doing it to avoid taxes until you're older is you never take what's called constructive possession of the money. So whoever, if it's an insurance company or whoever's paying the money would pay to the annuity company, and they would buy an annuity, and you would have a contract, and then whatever the terms is when you would start receiving that money, and then you start paying taxes on it. You can take a structure without, there's since then become other ones, but they don't have the tax advantages. They don't really make much sense. Where you can take the money and then buy, basically just buying an annuity.
Before I move on, do you know a person by the name of Gloria Satterfield? Or do you know of a person by the name of Gloria Satterfield?
No, I knew Gloria. I knew her for a lot of years.
And did she have any employment relationship with the defendant, to your knowledge?
Yes, she did. And when my children were first born, she helped my wife out a little bit with some laundry and stuff.
What, to your understanding, happened to her, if anything?
My understanding was that she was tripped by some of Alec and Maggie's dogs and hit her head, and approximately 3 weeks later, she died. I don't think she ever came out of the hospital.
Did you ever talk to the defendant about that event?
I recall having a brief conversation. It really wasn't a conversation. It was more him saying that the dogs knocked it down and that the kids were going to sue him for Gloria's death.
All right. The kids, which kids are you talking about?
Gloria's 2 boys, I believe she has.
When you say the kids were going to sue him, did he say it in the fashion of that was going to be an aggressive suit, or did he say it in the way that he was going to help out?
Oh, I understood exactly that it was going to be a friendly insurance claim, so to speak, so that, hey, this happened in hopes that the insurance company would probably pay them some amount of money. I took it to help them out.
Did you ever have any other conversations with him about that case other than that one?
Never had another conversation. Well, no, I've never had another conversation with him about it.
Are you familiar with the case known as the Ferris case or the Mack Trucks case?
Yes, I'm very familiar with it.
Did you have any involvement in that case?
Yes, early on, I had some involvement. I was asked to get involved because it dealt with a product failure, which is going back to your reference, has sort of been my specialty over the years. It was where a drive shaft had fallen out of a Mack truck and caused a motorist to have an accident. And when we looked into it, and it turns out there was a recall on it, and so it pretty much made it where it wasn't going to be much of a fight about Mack's responsibility. And so I knew it then, and then when I didn't do anything else in it until it was coming up to trial, and I spent a lot of time talking with Alec about evidentiary issues, witnesses, how they were trying the case, and the posture of it, that type of thing. So yeah, I was familiar with it.
Okay. Did you ultimately get involved where you were one of the lawyers representing the Ferrises?
No, I did not help him try it.
Did he have an outside lawyer associated with that, or were there lawyers from other firms associated with that?
Well, as I referenced earlier, sometimes there's more than just two law firms. There was a lawyer, a friend of ours in Columbia that got named Mr. Ridgway, got Mr. Chris Wilson involved, and then in turn, Chris Wilson asked Alec to get involved, which Alec and Chris had worked together a good bit over the years. So there's three law firms.
At some point in May of 2021, did you ever have a conversation with Jeannie Seconder about the, well, let me back up. So ultimately, did Alec and these other lawyers try the Ferris case?
They did.
And did they get a recovery in that case?
They did.
And you know how much Alec Murdaugh's share of the recovery was supposed to be?
I mean, the verdict was several $1 million. I believe that would have been in February of 2021. I believe the share that was supposed to go to PMPED was $792,000 as our portion of the fees.
And you corrected me, and that was the amount that was supposed to go to the firm, correct?
That's correct.
$792,000. Did you ever, in May of 2021, did you ever have any conversation with Jeannie Seconder about those fees?
I did.
And tell me what that conversation was, please.
It was sometime in close relation to Alec asking me about structuring attorney's fees. I walked in Lee Cope's office. Lee and Jeannie were having a conversation about that issue and her efforts to get all the paperwork on the Ferris matter. And she was frustrated. She thought she was getting a runaround both from Chris Wilson and Alec. And then she mentioned something to me about that he had suggested to her that he was trying to hide fees from the boating case.
All right. And what was your reaction to that when you heard that?
Do you want me to say what I said?
You can say the sanitized version, or you can say the real version, either way.
I said, oh, fuck, no, we're not.
And why was that your reaction?
Well, because to do that under any circumstance was illegal, unethical, and he would be putting us at risk, and we absolutely were not going to participate in anything that was illegal, unethical, or subjected us to liability or created issues with the South Carolina bar.
Was it the discussion of the firm leadership that needed to be gotten to the bottom of to make sure that didn't happen?
Well, it was Lee, I, and Jeannie, and we put it in her hands because if she told us that she was being told it was in trust at Chris Wilson's office, and I had no reason to doubt that. I thought he was just trying to take it out in some other way so it didn't go through our system or something, which it would also have been tax fraud on our part, not to have that accounted for, because we would have got a 1099 at some point in time. And just it was myriad reasons why that wasn't going to ever happen. But I thought if they're saying it was there, Jeannie, just take care of it, get the money. And I didn't think any more about it, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was any stealing going on or anything. I thought that, okay, he's got pressure on him from this Bowden case, and maybe thinks if he did an annuity out of Chris's trust account, that it wouldn't be accounted for, but it ultimately had to be accounted for. And I knew that. I do it involved a lot of our overseeing, a lot of the accounting and understand it. And there's just no damn way we were going to do that.
At that point in time, you just said you didn't think there was any stealing going on at that point. Not yet, at least.
No, that never came up during that period. We're talking late May of 2021.
Let me ask you this. You've known the defendant since the 90s?
I have.
Did you get to know his family?
Yes, I did.
Did you get to know Maggie?
I knew Maggie.
Did you know her fairly well?
I felt like I did, yes. He was a very nice person.
Did you know Paul?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit of how you knew Paul.
Um, oh. I knew Paul since he was born. Both he and Buster had always referred to me as Uncle Ronnie. We lived just across the way from each other, so I got to know him. I don't know if he used to, when he got into hunting, he hunted a lot on my property, he and Buster. I have a farm right here in Colleton County where I grew up. And so I got to know him, that way. And then Paul was, didn't think this would be that hard.
see if it's gonna.
Through the law firm.
It's horrific. He pretty much had free reign of my property, but he would always tell me if I wasn't very polite young man, and he wouldn't just go, even though he could. He would always let me know. And you know, he killed a lot of his first deer on our property, and you know, just got to see him grow up.
Did Paul have a shotgun he favored, to your knowledge?
I would see Paul with a like a 12 gauge Benelli Super Black Eagle. Yeah, I've seen him with that a number of times.
Did Paul occasionally like to hunt hogs?
There was a period of time where he was obsessed with it. He had dogs and those 300 blackout with goats and and when I was in the room, he didn't where the other one. At some point, he did that. There was no, I got stolen or misplaced. If it was misplaced, that would be my was good about not place. And that he had at this point. I don't recall the dates on any of that.
Tell you what happened. Replacement.
That they had a total of 3, and I remember Mr. Panda.
You after July and August, you informed that there had been some crystals had moving into September of 2021. Did you have any trial or anything going on that you wanted to
End of August, early September, I was getting before a possibility trial in Judge County of several weeks.
Did you receive any communications from your firm on issues regarding the defendant?
We were doing pre-trial things before trial starts. A lot of work gets done by the way. And so we were taking care of a lot of things that we were waiting around during the trial. And forming motions. I got court. I saw that this and he called and he said we have a problem. And he said I have to come now. And I said I need to and he didn't ever tell me what it was, but he said you have to now. And I could tell urgency and tell me where to meet him and that we can come to South Carolina. And Danny. Paperwork consists. I was asked to it was clear what had happened and that this money had been stolen.
Did any of the partners go to confront Alec with this information that had been uncovered?
Yes, there was a meeting the following morning at Lee's house. I did not attend. I did not need to attend. I was still getting ready for trial. I had already decided where this was going, and they met, and then we, Danny and Randy, Alec's brother, went and met with Alec.
And what was your understanding of what the defendant said as a result of that?
That he admitted and said that he knew he was going to get caught at some point in time, and admitted to them that he did it.
Ultimately, did the firm engage in a very extensive investigation to determine the extent of any alleged misappropriation that the defendant had done related to client fee, or excuse me, firm fees or client money?
We did. We initially turned over what we had to state law enforcement, and then just decided to, we immediately decided to hire an outside auditor, a forensic auditor, to come in and look at our books to see if there was anything else. But parallel with that, we were doing our own internal investigation into his files.
And was Jeannie Seconder, as your CFO, was she heavily involved in that review?
She was a point person doing that with whatever support staff she needed under my supervision and Mark and Lee's supervision.
And have you seen spreadsheets that she's made and other documentation that's been put together and gathered by others in the firm as that investigation went forward?
I'm very familiar with all of it.
And are the results of those accurate as you've been able to review firm records and gather information?
The documents that were entered into evidence earlier today through Ms. Seconder are accurate.
At any point in time, whether June of 2021 or going back years, if you, as a partner in PMPD, had found out that the defendant was allegedly diverting money to an account in the name of a business, an account that he actually controlled, and then converting that to personal use client money, what would you have done?
If I had become aware of it, he would have been asked to resign, or I would have forced a vote, and he would have been terminated under our contract.
What else, if anything, would you have done?
I would have done the same thing we did, would have turned it over to law enforcement and would have reported to the South Carolina bar because of it affected our business and our trust account.
If at any point over the years you had found out that the defendant had been diverting fees that were properly due the firm and spending those for personal use and never accounting for them and not being truthful with firm members, what, if anything, would you have done?
He would have been asked to resign, or a vote would have been called and he would have been terminated.
What else would you have done, if anything?
Because that conduct would have been illegal, it would have been reported to law enforcement as well as the South Carolina bar.
If at any point in time you had uncovered or had discovered information that the defendant was having checks issued from the firm trust account in the name of Palmetto State Bank, and then having someone at the bank convert those into checks that he could use for personal use, what, if anything, would you have done?
Would have asked for his immediate resignation and or forced a vote, and he would have been terminated. His activities would have been reported to law enforcement as well as any activities of anyone at the bank who was complicit in this what I would call a money laundering scheme.
In these instances, would the firm have also engaged in a detailed review to determine the extent of any alleged misappropriation?
Well, absolutely, and I could only wish that those clients early on had brought that something to our attention, so we could have dealt with it years ago.
Nothing further at this time.
Yes, sir. I'll stand for a moment. Mr. Griffin?
Good afternoon, Mr. Crosby.
Good afternoon, Mr. Griffin.
Can we get this photo taken down? Can we just kill it? Kill it? Yeah, the Oma. That was a computer thing. There it went. So it's good. It's good. We're good. Thank you. Mr. Crosby, I was struck by a comment you made, and I just want to confirm it. You were informed by folks at the meeting when Alec was confronted about financial misdeeds. According to the reports you received, that Alec's response was he knew he was going to get caught at some point in time. Is that what was reported to you?
That's what I recall.
And he asked you to speak eulogize Paul at Paul's funeral, right?
He did, and I did.
And you very close to Paul, and Paul was a super guy, wasn't he?
Yes to both of those questions.
You said that Paul carried around a 300 blackout and a 12 gauge shotgun, a Benelli Super Eagle, I believe you said.
That's my memory. And you know, obviously they had numerous guns, but I had seen Paul with those on multiple occasions.
If I showed you a Benelli Super Eagle that's in the courtroom, would you be able to recognize it's Paul's or not? Or?
I don't know at this juncture. I believe it was camouflage.
Camouflage Super Eagle.
I mean, all camouflage Super Eagles.
Trying to not point at anybody, but does this look like Paul's gun?
I'll say it looked like it. Will I say it was? I can't say that.
Understand, and Your Honor, I'm holding up for the record states exhibit number 4, and I put my papers down. Also, you testified that when you got to Moselle the night of the 7th, that you were you went through the main entrance, and that's the entrance with the, I guess, the brick facade or whatever, the brick gates opening up. That's the main entrance you went in?
Yes, there's a brick facade and then I think metal iron gates, but they were open.
And then if you go up, and you would have gone straight to the house if you'd gone straight, but you turn right, and you said, you know, and there's a little roadway there, an old runway, and you were able to get back up to where the kennels were from that direction, correct?
That's correct. It's not far when you turn right,
Right.
A couple hundred yards maybe.
And then, but you said you were able to see shell casings, what you thought would be 223. Where were they?
The one, I don't think I saw everyone that was there. I remember seeing one, seems like in the driveway. closer to the road from Paul and Maggie's bodies.
So were you able to get inside the crime scene tape?
I don't know if there was crime scene tape up at that point in time.
Okay. So you were able, as you recall, just to walk up. Were Maggie and Paul's bodies covered at the time you got there?
Yes.
But you were able to get into the crime scene close enough where you could tell what you thought caliber of the shell case.
Right, and I didn't walk from where I was parked there. I walked completely around the hangar and went over to talk to people I knew that there, the fire and rescue people, just to get what their assessment was. And I could see from where they were positioned, I could see, I wasn't like, I didn't get over it, but I could see from a distance, and I'm very familiar with
Sure.
firearms, and I saw what I thought was a 223 casing.
And you later learned, I guess, the next day on the 8th that it wasn't a 223, but a 300 blackout. Is that right?
Yes, and I can't for the life of me tell you there was that point in time there was some law enforcement out in the hangar and around, and I just asked a question and they corrected me.
Right. Okay. And that and you started to assist any way you could with trying to find out who could have done this. Isn't that right?
Well, Jim, I didn't that night. I was trying to get, and we were starting to, I don't know, it was shot, man, but out in the days following, we had a lot of conversation amongst my partners and I about who could have done this, and obviously we were theorizing on stuff, and with very little information, obviously, but we were trying to find out things, whether Paul had been in an argument with anyone, or if anybody had. I don't know. It's just what you would naturally do, is ask questions.
One of the things, you went down to Jimmy Butler's. You remember that?
I did.
Now, what's Jimmy Butler?
Jimmy Butler's a business in Barnville that does mechanic work. He sells trailers. He sells portable buildings. Used to sell cars, but I had learned that Paul had taken his truck there the Friday before the murders.
Right. And so the Friday before the murders, Paul's truck, and what was his normal truck? Was it F?
It was a F-150.
A white F-150.
White F-150.
And you had understood that his white F-150 was put in the shop at Jimmy Butler.
Yes, and I specifically was going to see if Paul's guns were in his truck.
Right. And did you check the truck?
I did. I looked inside of it, and I also got. I had learned that Mr. Rowe was working for Ella at the time, and had taken him over to pick him up when he took his truck to drop off for repairs. And I asked Mr. Butler to pull surveillance tape so I could see if Paul got his guns out of his truck while he was getting out of one vehicle into another.
And because it was Paul's habit to carry the guns in his truck, right?
Right, and I believe actually when I looked in there was still a pistol and some shotgun shells, that type of stuff in there, but I didn't see any long guns. I didn't get inside of his truck and rummage around. I just looked.
And so you didn't observe any 300 blackout or any shotgun in Paul's truck at Jimmy Butler's? Is that right?
I did not.
And then I think you also looked at videotape to see if Paul took guns out of his truck when he got back in. I guess Mr. Rowe picked him up. Is that right?
That's correct. And another one of, another pickup that Alec had on the farm.
And you didn't see Paul removing any guns from his truck when he got in the truck with Mr. Rowe?
That was not evident on the video.
Okay.
And I could see him getting out of one vehicle into the other.
And you were down there on the morning of the 8th, and after SLED had released the crime scene. And when I say there, I'm talking about down at the kennels. Were you not?
Yes, I was asked to go there by Randy's brother, Alec.
Okay. And I don't want to be too grotesque at all, but just were there still blood and biological material there at the scene?
Yes.
Okay. And did you notice that there were some still birdshot pellets in the feed room that had not been collected by the SLED agent?
Yes. They were what appeared to me to be we could pretty much tell what they were, yeah, from looking up. And I believe they would have been a TSS type load.
Okay. And did you gather those up, to your knowledge?
Did I?
You or anybody, with you?
Jim, Mr. Griffin, I apologize.
Call me.
We know each other, so I
Please,
apologize.
call me Jim.
That area in that room, well, we could see them. It was so bad. We thought we were going to, at some point, clean it up, but it overwhelmed both my partner, Mark, and I. Well, we could see that, and we could see everything, all the other aftermath. We were getting biological material. It just couldn't be there. It was bad, and it was overwhelming us. So, no, I did not try to collect evidence.
And the scene inside that feed room, I take it as something that still is etched in your mind's eye and memory.
Yes.
When you were down there, when you got there the first time, I believe you went up to Mark Ball, and he was there. He got there before you.
Maybe a few minutes. We had already talked about, that.
Did it look to you and Mark like the crime scene was being preserved and carefully keeping people off of areas that maybe they shouldn't be trampling on?
Well, it was my understanding that the crime scene had been released, so that.
Well, I'm talking about 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, I jumped back. 11 o'clock when you got there, around 11 on the night of the 7th. When you pulled up, as I understand, you walked around the shed, the workshop, and went to the back and maybe Mr. Ball is back there. I could have that wrong, but is that what happened?
Well, we were there. I saw people working through the crime scene. And you're kind of asking me for an opinion that I don't feel qualified to give, because I assumed that whatever was going on was being done with whatever procedures. But there were people in that, in the crime scene doing various things.
Okay. And I'm not asking you to give an opinion. I was just asking you if anyone expressed an opinion in your presence about they shouldn't be doing this or shouldn't be doing that.
I don't specifically recall.
Okay. Did at some point in time, you and Mark and whoever else, were y'all directed to go to the main residence at?
We were, and for the life of me, I can't tell you who told us to go. I can tell you it was at the time that whoever is the photographer for the crime scene, they were getting ready to start, taking photographs, and it was stated that we're going to photograph the scene. Y'all go to the house. We don't, you don't need to be in these photographs.
Okay. And so who all went to the house? Best you can remember.
I know I did. I know Mark did. Austin Crosby, who's one of my partners, did. Danny Henderson did. Randy Murdaugh did. John Marvin did. Elliot at some point did. And he may have been, I believe he was accompanied by some officers when he came. I think maybe Chris Wilson may have. The others I'm positive of, but sure, there could have been a couple other people.
And had it looked to you like anybody from law enforcement had searched the resident, inspected the residence before you guys went in?
I don't know that I would know what it would look like if it had been searched. It was my perception that it had not been searched yet.
And then you mentioned at some point in time, Alec came up and maybe law enforcement were with him?
Mr. Griffin, my memory is that Alec came in, and at or about the same time, two agents came, and I remember them collecting his clothes is what stands out to me. One stood in the doorway or the foyer to the house. We were kind of in the living room and maybe the kitchen area, and then another agent, and I'm assuming it was SLED, but it was kind of blurry, and it happened pretty quickly. Went maybe to the door of a bedroom while Elliot was changing clothes, and then he brought his clothes out and gave them to the agent who stood in the edge of the living room or foyer or whatever you want to call it.
And did the agent just open up a bag and Elliot dumped his clothes in the bag? Is that how you remember? A paper bag?
I do not know what the composition of the bag was. It was a bag, and it seemed to me the agent was holding the bag out like open,
right? And
that Elliot kind of had his clothes in his fingers and just dropped them in, is what my memory was. And what that was, I only recall there being one bag, and he dropped them in, and it was like a pretty quick transaction.
His clothes were not put on a hanger for sure. So.
No, Elliot had them in his hands when he came out of the bedroom. He was in there long enough to take those off, and I think he put back on another pair of shorts or something and shirt.
I know, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit.
It's okay. I've been right where you are,
Right.
and that happens.
Um, the- I think you mentioned in one of your interviews with SLED that Alec had some annoying quirks, and one of them, he would just take phone calls in the middle of deposition.
He would.
Would he get phone calls from his family, Buster, Maggie, and Paul, and drop everything and take the calls?
I've witnessed that.
Was that frequent?
Yes, he would do it in depositions. He would do it in the middle of a conversation, and not with them, but definitely with them. And even in partner meetings and stuff, he would take a call and walk out of the room.
Sure. You had mentioned in your testimony that when you were asked by Ms. Seconder about the Ferris fee issue, that really your concern was not that Alec was diverting fees, but he was trying to shelter fees from being disclosed in the civil case. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, let's make sure definitionally we're talking about the same thing. My concern was not that he was stealing, because I trusted him. I had no reason to believe that he was stealing. It was the latter, that what she conveyed to me was he was wanting to hide some fees or hide money somehow. I don't remember it being said that it was like I heard earlier in Maggie's name. It was just that he was gonna take the fees from Chris Wilson's account, so there wouldn't be any record, is the way I understood it, in our trust account.
Right. And you said, F no, we're not doing that.
Those were my words.
The what was Alex scratch that. After the murders of Maggie and Paul, did you, the immediate aftermath and going forward a few months, did Alec come to the office much?
It was sporadic, but I knew that he was having a lot of trouble sleeping, and just lost his family and his father, and him and his father were very close. We were aware that or had understanding that he was taking like medicine to try to help him sleep, and maybe for anxiety, and just the normal things that you would expect there. So even when he came, I would walk in his office and he'd be falling asleep in his chair. He'd be sitting in there, which was evident to me that he wasn't sleeping well. And so I know Ms. Seconder mentioned pills earlier that he was taking. That's what we knew he was taking, because he couldn't sleep at night. He'd be up at all hours of the night.
And did you notice changes in his physical appearance, losing weight?
Yes, he was losing weight. I don't think he was eating very well by all reports.
And I guess let's sort of go back. The night of June 7th, the morning of June 8th was, I mean, what was his demeanor?
Well, his demeanor is that he was upset. I could tell that, and
You see him cry?
yeah, we cried together. I mean, he kept telling me, especially to me, he kept telling me how much Paul loved me, and every time he would say that, we would it would be emotional. I mean, and then he told me that several times over the next few days. It was just almost be how he would start a conversation with me would be to talk about Paul.
And then, did he spend a lot of time with Buster down at Maggie's parents in Somerville, do you know?
I knew they were. Can you give me the time frame?
So starting in June?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I know he and Maggie's parents had a good relationship, and I recall because in some of this, I remember seeing some texts between he and I that he was down there. I don't remember. Well, they're dated. I'm sure you have them.
Right.
And he told me he was down with Maggie's parents. It was one of the days in that time immediately following the murders.
Right. And then at one point in time around, I don't know if it's 4th of July, did he come to your place by boat, or do you remember that? And
I can't say that it was on the 4th of July, but I remember his brother Randy and his wife. I had invited them to my house, for the 4th, and for to spend, and they had, something that those of us in the law firm do a lot to spend time on the weekends together, and they were there, and I'd asked Alec to come over, and he and Buster came by boat from Edison.
and Alec was carrying a gun with him on the boat, wasn't he? No.
Yes, he had a gun in what I want to call a shopping bag, like a cloth type, shopping bag, not one of those plastic ones.
Had you ever seen Alec carrying a gun around before for protection before the murders?
No.
Some point in time, Alec and Buster and the family put out a reward, did they not, for capture of tips for whoever would lead to the arrest of whoever killed Maggie and Paul. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and who all was involved in the funding of it. I don't know, but there was a reward. I believe I know a reward was put out.
And the firm agreed to administer it if there was anyone step forward.
We did.
1 second, Your Honor. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Firm have to ever pay anybody for that reward?
No.
You're asked a lot of questions about your interactions and relationship with Alec Murdaugh. You've known Alec Murdaugh how long?
Well, I guess a total of 25 years or so.
Did you really know Alec Murdaugh?
What's the question?
Did he really know Alec Murdaugh?
Character question.
Did he know Alec Murdaugh? Did he really know Alec Murdaugh?
Yes.
I sustain the objection.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Step down. We'll go to the jury room for a break. What's coming up next, Mr. Waters?
Your Honor, we have the GSR expert, and that's the next thing. You know, I think we can get that witness done before the end of the day.
We'll-
Your Honor, Mr. Griffin used to cross on this, and he
Shouldn't
couldn't
take long.
talk in nothing but GSR for 2 days. I'm a little worried about that timetable.
All right. Well, we'll take about 7 minutes. Thank you. Your next witness.
Okay, this court, State of South Carolina would now call forensic scientist Megan M. Fletcher.
Raise your right hand, left hand on the Bible. Do you affirm the testimony about to give the court in this trial shall be the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. As you take a seat at this witness stand, state your name again for the record. Spell your last name.
My name is Megan Fletcher, Fletcher.
Good afternoon, Ms. Fletcher.
Good afternoon.
With the court's permission, we're going to end day 12, okay?
Yes, sir.
Would you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about yourself, but also your background, your training, and your training in the field of expertise I've asked you to testify about here today, please?
Yes, sir. So I grew up in Ohio. I was born and raised there. After I graduated from high school, I attended Chatham College in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I graduated from there in 2005 with my bachelor's degree in biochemistry and English. After that, I went to Marshall University, where I obtained my master's in forensic science, emphasizing in computer forensics and forensic chemistry in 2007. I then started my career at SLED in 2007 as well, where I started my training to become a trace evidence analyst in the Forensic Services Laboratory. And the first thing that I started training in was gunshot primer residue analysis.
Why did you come to South Carolina?
For the job.
Okay. Did you have any relatives here or family?
I do, but it was really for the job. Trace evidence was always kind of my dream job.
Okay. So tell us some more about trace evidence and your training and your background and what you loved about it.
So trace evidence is a type of evidence that you can't typically see with the naked eye. So you need a microscope or other types of instrumentation to be able to detect it. For trace evidence in the Forensic Services Laboratory at SLED, we consider explosives, fire debris, fibers, glass, gunshot primer residue, paint, fibers, physical fit analysis, pressure-sensitive tape, and general physical and chemical unknowns, all different types of trace evidence.
Specifically in the field of gunshot primer residence, tell us about your training, your experience, and what has led you to this point where I'm going off you for an expert in just a minute.
So in 2007, I started my career. I started my training at that point. I began an 11-month training program for gunshot primer residue analysis. It's an in-house training program that consists of practical, written, and oral examinations in the theory of gunshot primer residue, as well as the instrumentation used to analyze that type of evidence.
So what is it?
Gunshot primer residue, well, let's start with gunshot residue. Gunshot residue is everything that comes out of a gun when it's fired. That's the smoke, the soot, the flame, burned and unburned gunpowder particles, but also something called gunshot primer residue. And that's what we're looking for at the Trace Lab at SLED. Gunshot primer residue particles are microscopic molten particles that contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony. They come from the primer component of the cartridge.
And can you explain some more? How do you examine it? What do you do to determine if there's gunshot primer residue?
So I believe that you've already heard about how gunshot primer residue is collected. It's collected using those particle lifts with the sticky surfaces. Once I get those particle lifts in the lab, I will then examine them on a scanning electron microscope with an dispersive X-ray detector. So an SEM EDX.
Now, what's the second thing you said? The SEM, and what did you say after that?
Energy dispersive X-ray detector.
What is that?
Well, the scanning electron microscope's a super powerful microscope. You might be used to a light microscope that you might have used in school, and that might magnify something around 400 times. The scanning electron microscope uses electrons instead. And so we can magnify things 30,000, 50,000 times. The energy dispersive X-ray detector allows us to analyze a sample for which elements are actually present in the sample. So the SEM component, the microscope component, allows us to see a sample and analyze the shape and the morphology of a given sample. But the EDX component allows us to see what elements are actually present in that individual sample.
Now, when I first started years ago, we were just looking for the 3 elements. How has that changed over the years in your specific field?
So currently, we are looking for characteristic particles of gunshot primer residue. It's a singular particle that contains all 3 elements of lead, barium, and antimony. It can't be a particle that contains 1 or 2 of those elements. It has to contain all 3 of those.
And that didn't used to be the case, did it?
No, sir, I did not.
So it's got to contain all 3 of them
Yes, sir.
before you'll clarify it as what? Or
Before
determine as what?
I'm sorry.
Before you'll determine as what? It's got to clarify, it's got to contain all 3 of them. Go ahead.
It has to be microscopic. It has to be molten, and it has to contain lead, barium, and antimony in order for me to report it as characteristic of gunshot primer residue.
And I know everybody knows except me, but what's molten?
So molten appears to be rounded in shape. It looks like it underwent high heat and pressure. Lots of times they're spherical, so like a ball, but sometimes they might look like a football. Just have to have like a rounded shape to the edges.
And how does evidence get to you, forensic scientist Megan Fletcher? How does it actually come to you?
There's different circumstances, but typically evidence is submitted from a local agency or SLED, and it's submitted through the Evidence Control Department. The Evidence Control Department assigns it a unique lab number, and each item of evidence is assigned an item at that time. It then is brought up to the trace lab by either myself or another analyst or a technician, and then it goes through the process of inventory and then analysis.
How long have you been doing this?
Over 15 years.
You love your job.
I do.
And how many analysis have you performed in the field of, well, in trace evidence to start with?
Over 1,500 cases, samples, well over 3,000.
And have you been offered in courts of record of this state and other states perhaps as an expert in the field of trace evidence and gunshot primer residue? And have you been so accepted in courts of record of this state as an expert in trace evidence and gunshot primer residue?
Yes, sir, 49 times.
Your Honor, this time the state of South Carolina would offer forensic scientist Megan M. Fletcher as an expert in the field of trace evidence to include gunshot primer residue.
To her making it 50 times, John.
And we thank you.
She is so qualified in the field of trace evidence and gunshot primer residue.
Why do you love your job?
I just find it really interesting. With trace evidence, I get to analyze different types of evidence. My daily job duties can change depending on what needs to be done that day.
Let's go over some just on a live person, human being,
Yes, sir.
blood flowing.
Yes, sir.
Is there a period of time after which SLED's guidelines say we won't try to determine if there's gunshot primer residue on somebody?
Yes, sir.
What is it?
Beyond 6 hours, we will not analyze a GSR kit from a living individual. And the reason that we will not analyze that is because in-house studies, as well as peer-reviewed published studies, have shown that gunshot residue so readily transfers and is so readily removed around 4 to 6 hours that beyond 6 hours, it couldn't be tied back to an initial incident.
And what's the common sense answer why you won't do it after 6 hours?
So if you shoot a gun, as soon as you put that gun down, you essentially start to remove those gunshot primer residue particles. They aren't destroyed, but you're simply transferring them to other objects. You might be putting your hands in your pocket. You might touch a steering wheel. You might wash your hands, and that would remove most, if not all, of the particles. So beyond that 4 hours, you're really looking at the total removal of those particles.
So if you didn't wash your hands, just everyday living or touching, could, after over 4 hours, you wouldn't want to, or 6 hours, I think you said it is now.
6 hours is our policy, but an in-house study with controlled participants where we informed them that they weren't allowed to wash their hands and told them to basically stick to clerical work, we really saw that drop off around 4 hours.
If you did wash your hands, and you know somebody washed their hands, they told you, hey, I washed my hands, would you test it?
We would.
Okay. But would you expect most of them to be gone at that point from washing your hands?
It depends on how well you wash your hands. Okay. We expect most of it to be gone, but we've seen it to still be present even after somebody's washed their hands.
And you did a little bit, if you can do a little bit more for me. Gunshot primer residue, is there a certain, I mean, how do you determine, is there a certain distance, vicinity, shooting? I mean, what are you looking for in determining whether gunshot residue is present, whether someone was in the vicinity to get it?
So really what we're trying to determine when we're looking for gunshot primer residue is, one, were they in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm? Were they shooting a firearm? Or is it simply transfer? And in most cases, we can't determine whether it's vicinity, which includes shooting, or simply transfer.
Discharge, vicinity, which just mean, are you close to it?
Yeah, so vicinity can be 2 to 3 feet to either side of the shooter and outwards of about 60 feet in front of the shooter.
Discharge, vicinity, and transfer. What do you mean by transfer?
So you can get gunshot residue on your hands from an object that already has gunshot residue on it, or from a person who has gunshot residue on them. So if somebody else shoots a gun and you shake their hands, you could get gunshot residue on your hand that way. You could also touch a recently fired or a dirty weapon and get gunshot residue on your hands that way.
So if you had just fired a firearm and I came up and shook your hand, could I get it from that?
That is possible.
Okay. If I reached under to grab you to turn you, could I get it if you had been shot with gunshot residue?
So gunshot residue does travel with the path of the bullet. So we do expect to find it on victims who have sustained gunshot wounds. And around that gunshot wound specifically, we do expect to find gunshot primer residue particles. So if you touch that area, there is the possibility of transfer.
And again, if you don't mind me touching you on the arm, if you had gunshot residue on your arm and I did that, could I get it?
That is a possibility as well.
And what's that called?
So in that case, that would be a secondary or tertiary transfer.
Transfer.
Yes.
From one item to me.
Yes, sir.
Right. And the other way is if I fired the firearm.
Yes, sir.
And if I fired a firearm, where do you look for to see if somebody's fired a firearm based on what they're wearing? Like if I was wearing this right now, fired something here, and you had this jacket, where would you look for potential gunshot residue?
So if I knew that that was what you were wearing at the time of the shooting, we would sample from the right sleeve of that jacket, the right chest area of the jacket, the left sleeve of the jacket, and the left chest area of the jacket. We may also want to sample the tie because it's center on your chest, and then the right side of your pants and the left side of your pants. And then your shoes are also a possibility.
Why is that?
Because your shoes are also in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm. Sometimes we get results off of them, sometimes we don't.
Okay. And would you test my hands?
That would be the best evidence is the hands, because the hands will allow us to link it to a specific incident within 6 hours, whereas clothing, we can't tell you when it got there. And that's because on an inanimate object such as clothing, that gunshot primer residue is going to stay until it's actively removed. So you would have to brush it off, you would have to wash it off, you would have to do some activity to actually remove it from the clothing.
And that was the next thing I was getting into. You beat me to it. So, but if I just shot and washed my hands off, potentially I could have washed it all, gunshot primer residue off, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But on inanimate objects, and you just said it, and I apologize, how long can gunshot residue stay on?
Indefinitely, if you don't touch it, if you're not actively moving it around or washing it, it can stay until it's removed.
Now let's just say I'm dead, okay?
Okay.
And I got shot just a few feet. You shot me from my feet. Okay.
Okay.
I fall down. Would you expect to have gunshot residue on me?
It depends on the firearm, but in general, yes.
And why is that?
So the gunshot primer residue comes out, a large majority of the gunshot primer residue comes out the muzzle of the firearm. And not only does it come out the muzzle of the firearm, but it also follows the path of the bullet. And so wherever that bullet's going, it's going to follow behind it.
And the follow-up to that is it SLED's recommendation now? If you know, like me, I've been shot, do y'all test for gunshot, or will you test for gunshot residue on a deceased person who's, you know, has been killed with a firearm?
SLED will not test on victims who have sustained gunshot wounds. And we have not been testing on those victims since January of 2022.
And prior to that, was it your policy not to do that, or recommend to local law enforcement agencies not to do that?
We didn't have an official policy, but we were recommending it due to the lack of probative information that you could gain from it.
And just say that one more time. What do you mean by the lack of probative information?
So like I said before, gunshot residue can only put somebody in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, or it could say that they transfer gunshot residue on them. So it's just putting gunshot primer residue on them. A victim's already of a gunshot wound has already been established to be in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm. So it doesn't add any additional information to the case.
Now, there's still other items like stippling, which you're not, do you know about stippling based in your field of expertise?
That's not in my field of expertise.
Now, let's get to this case. Forensic scientist Megan Fletcher, did you have an occasion to examine some items for a potential gunshot primer residue?
Yes, sir, I did.
I think we have these marked, so I can find them. Shirt and the pants. I'm going to try to take these in the date, the order that you, chronological order of when you examined. You follow me?
I do.
And I'm going to show you what Mark states, 418. And if you, you like gloves?
I have some with me.
Okay, and I think we also have some here. I thought we had a whole box here.
I think that they're on the floor.
You got some. And why are you using gloves?
I use gloves to protect myself and to protect the evidence. I don't want to put any of my DNA or anything that might be on myself onto the evidence, and I don't want anything that might be on the evidence on me.
And not just gloves in your laboratory. And I thought I asked you to bring one, but do you wear a lab coat?
When we process clothing, we do wear lab coats, and that helps protect us from our regular clothes from transferring over any evidence onto, or not evidence, but any materials over onto the evidence.
And that's to protect the evidence, really, as much as you, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you have a lab coat and gloves before you start looking at these items.
Well, this also has a DNA request on it. Usually the requests are also on the outside of the box.
So you have your white coat and gloves on when you're in the lab looking at these.
Yes, but
Okay.
because it has a DNA request, we also have a mask on.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Okay, you have a mask in addition to that.
Yes.
Okay, please open 418 and tell the jury what it is. Bless you.
This is SLED Lab L21-09074, item 19. I recognize it with our yellow barcode sticker. And this is SLED lab number L21-09074, item number 20, again with our yellow barcode sticker.
And what date did you examine these on?
I didn't physically examine these items. Jamie Hall would have taken the particle lifts off of these items, so her initials and date would be on everything. But that, the date that she did that would have been June 8th.
Okay. And when did you actually look at them?
I looked at she did call me in while she was processing them, but I didn't physically take custody of these items.
And I understand that. Maybe I was jumping ahead in my mind. Did you have an occasion when Jamie Hall was processing? You say she called you in there?
She did.
Okay, why?
She smelled something rather unusual for our evidence. Our evidence is usually pretty musky smelling. And when she opened up item 19, which is the white t-shirt, she did smell a strong odor of laundry detergent, and I did confirm that with her.
So she smelled that, said, hey, come in here, I want you to see this, or whatever. Could you smell it?
I could smell the laundry detergent as well.
Smelled like laundry detergent.
Yes, sir.
Did you also, so she took a sample from there, a lift, if you will. So you were examining the lifts off the shirt, correct?
Correct.
And the pants.
Correct.
Did you also get to look at the pants that day on June 8th when Ms. Hall looked at them?
I don't remember if I was in there when she processed the shorts, but I have seen pictures of that she took of the shorts.
Okay, and can you describe the shirt and the shorts when you saw them? The pictures of them.
The shirt is a white t-shirt. There is some staining on the lower left-hand side, but relatively clean. The green cargo shorts are clean.
Okay. Now, what did you do? And while we're here, did you also receive the forensic scientist? Let's start with the shirt.
Okay.
Tell the jury specifically now, we got all day. Tell them specifically. What did you do when you examined the particle lifts from that shirt?
The particle lifts were analyzed on the scanning electron microscope. And how we do that in our lab and how most laboratories throughout the world actually do it is use a software program to help us out. And that's because the particles that we're looking at are so small. If you can imagine 2 football fields, we're actually looking for particles the size of a pea on those two football fields. So we use a software that does a little bit of an automated analysis, and that automated analysis uses brightness and contrast that's associated with known particles of gunshot primer residue. And it does that automated analysis overnight for us. And in the next day or over the weekend, whatever it is, we come in and then it provides us a list of candidate features. It tells us what features that it thinks contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony. As the analyst, I then look at those features, I relocate to them on the SEM. So I physically drive the SEM back to that, to the location that it saved. I look at the particle, make sure that it's molten in nature, and then I use the energy dispersive X-ray detector to scan the particle to determine whether lead, barium, and antimony are present.
And I think Ms. Hall described where she took the particle list from. Did you determine, were there any gunshot residue? What did you find on the shirt?
Particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were found. Particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue are microscopic molten particles that contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony.
And it can come from?
It can come from being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or being transferred from an object that has gunshot primer residue on it. No time frame can be provided as to when these particles were deposited.
And as far as 418 in evidence, the shirt, can you tell where the particle lifts were from, like from the right sleeve, the right chest side?
Can I refer to my notes, please?
Please. I think His Honor will let you.
So for the white t-shirt, from the particle lift that was collected from the right sleeve, right chest area, 2 particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were found. And from the left sleeve, left chest area, the particle lift collected from there, 1 particle characteristic of gunshot primer residue was found. Those particle lifts are combined into one result for a result of multiple particles.
What does that mean that you found two particle lifts? I mean, as far as the amount of particles you found, what does that mean in your field of expertise?
My opinion is that that object, this t-shirt, was either in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or came into contact with something that had gunshot primer residue on it. I can't tell you the likelihood, which one is more likely to have happened.
And that's your opinion, correct?
That's my opinion.
Now, also in 418, and again, these were the defendant's shirts, pants, and clothes that, and shoes that we're going to get to in a minute that you were examining, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
That's what the chain showed.
That's what the submission showed, yes.
Submission slip. Thank you. Now let's go to the pants. Did you have an occasion to examine a particle lifts that Ms. Hall did?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, and again, and we may not go through this every time, but can you tell the jury what you did again when you were examining the particle lifts, please?
So the particle lifts from the shorts were analyzed the same way as the particle lifts from the shirt, the same way that we analyze every particle lift that's submitted for gunshot primer residue or collected for gunshot primer residue. Goes through the automated process. I go in, I confirm or that there are particles present or that there aren't particles present.
Can you tell me, did you locate any particles and where they were on
Yeah.
these shorts, please?
Yes, sir. On the right side, right groin area, there were 2 particles located and confirmed. And then on the left groin area, there was 1 particle located and confirmed.
And you issued a report. What are your findings as a result of finding these particle lists on the shorts that the submission slip said belonged to the defendant on states 418? What's your opinion?
Particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were found. Again, my opinion is that they were this pair of shorts were either in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or came in contact with something that had gunshot primer residue on it. Again, I can't tell you which is more likely, and I can't tell you when those particles were deposited.
So they could have come from a transfer holding a gun and then putting it on your pants?
That's correct.
Could have come from being in the vicinity of a shot?
That's correct.
Could they have come from discharging?
Well, the shorts themselves can't discharge, so on an inanimate object, we just say that they're in the vicinity to the discharge.
That's what I meant, yeah, in the vicinity. The vicinity of a discharge.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, they can't discharge. Respectfully. Now, did you have an occasion to examine the lifts from Alex Murdaugh's hands that were lifted by Murdaugh, I believe?
Yes, sir, I did.
And they're already in evidence. And you basically, after Jamie Hall says, hey, these were all done right, they then go to you, right?
Yes, sir.
These
That's
are already in evidence.
That's not the GSR.
These are the GSR kits. You know, I don't think we need this in evidence. Did you have an occasion to examine the GSR kit?
I did.
It was taken from Alex Murdaugh?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did you know, you've talked about that 4-hour, 6-hour period. Again, was that checked? And did you make sure that that was collected in the time period or you wouldn't have performed your examination?
That's correct. Not only is it checked by the person inventorying, in this case, Jamie Hall, before I will sign off on that inventory sheet, I also double check the GSR information form. That GSR information form that is included in the kit is also scanned, so we retain a record of it so that I can go back and double check that was within the 6 hours.
Okay, so you did that.
I did.
All right. And what was your, did your examination conclude as far as the particle lift that was taken from the defendant, Alex Murdaugh?
So one particle lift was collected from his right hand and one from his left hand. One particle characteristic of gunshot primer residue was found. In general, particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue are microscopic, molten particles that contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony. Gunshot primer residue can come from the discharging of a firearm, being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, or coming into contact with a surface that has gunshot primer residue on it.
And y'all are going to say that conclusion if it's got just a few particle lifts or a bunch of them?
I'm sorry.
Just
what-
a general conclusion, that's what you're going to find, that there are particle lifts and it can come from one of those three ways, right?
Yes, sir.
Discharge, vicinity.
For hands, we have one of those three ways. For clothing, we only have the vicinity and the transfer.
So is that consistent? If I grabbed one of these firearms and handed it to an officer, would that be consistent with your findings? You can get it from a transfer of a firearm?
You could get one particle from transferring from a firearm, yes.
If you fired a firearm and washed your hands and then grabbed a firearm and handed it to a police officer, would that be consistent with that also?
Well, you still had that transfer from the firearm. It didn't really matter what you did prior to that. You still could have had that one particle on your hands from that transfer of the firearm.
Did you have an occasion to examine the shoes?
I did.
Particle list from the shoes?
Yes, sir.
States 419. You still got your gloves on?
No, but I can put another pair on.
And what were you provided regarding these shoes?
We were provided that these were the shoes collected from Richard Alexander Murdaugh.
And did you, were you able, well, tell me what your examination from the particle list revealed.
No particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were detected.
How many?
None.
None.
No, none.
You know, think about the lab. Did you really know about, do you know anything about the case that I mean, at that point, you're examining something, you don't know anything about who's wearing what or what you're examining, do you? Or who's you're examining, other than the submission slips.
No, I know who it is based on the submission sheet,
Right.
which is important because it has to come from somebody who didn't sustain a gunshot wound.
Okay, and I got that. That's a bad
But-
question. But other than that, you don't know about the case or what evidence, potential evidence, right?
I just know that it was a priority request.
You don't know what shoes the potential suspect was wearing during the day, or how many shoes they were wearing, if they were even wearing shoes, do you?
No, sir.
So your results after finding no gunshot primer residue or what on your report? Will you read it like you reported it?
Yes, sir. No particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue detected. The absence of primer residue on the item is consistent with, but not limited to, the following scenarios: the item not being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, cleaning of the item, excessive blood or debris on the item, environmental factors including wind and rain, the ammunition discharged, lead-free, non-toxic, or some .22 caliber rimfire ammunition not producing particles characteristic of the conventional primer residue, or the firearm not producing primer residue on the item when discharged.
So at this point, you've examined a shirt,
Yes, sir.
shorts,
Yes.
hands,
Yes, sir.
gunshot, and shoes.
Yes.
And the date you examined all those again was what?
The date that they were placed on the.
The particle list that you examined, yes.
Yes, the date they were placed on the scanning electron microscope was June 8th, 2021.
June 8th.
Yes, sir.
And that's the same day that Jamie Hall smelled the shirt.
Yes, sir.
Same day you smelled the shirt.
Yes, sir.
Did you receive any other items in this investigation where you were requested to determine whether or not there was any gunshot primary residue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I want to show you now what's, I believe, with everybody's help, states number 100, seatbelt. Thank you very much. And you said a priority was placed on this case, right?
Yes, sir.
I apologize. Do you sometimes, or have you been present when Jamie Hall was doing the particle lifts, and have you actually assisted?
Yes, sir, especially if there is an abnormal item submitted for analysis.
All right, and abnormal's got a lot of definitions, but in your world, what does that abnormal mean?
So typical items that we receive are obviously gunshot residue kits, but clothing items like T-shirts or hooded sweatshirts or pants or shorts or shoes, so things that we can have a standard operating procedure for. Those things we can say that we're going to collect from the same areas every single time. Other items are not so typical and then require a little bit more analysis on them.
States 100, is that example of one of those?
Yes, a seatbelt would be an abnormal item.
Do you know when you examined this?
The seatbelt was examined on September 1st, 2021.
And it's brought to your lab,
Correct.
the director's lab, excuse me. And is this what you examined?
Yes, sir.
And did you actually assist Ms. Hall in attempting to get particle lifts off this?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay, so you were both in the room,
Correct.
gloves on,
Yes.
jacket on,
Yes.
mask on?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell these folks, can you help me tell them what this is and where you attempted to get particle lifts?
Yes. So this is, I had to Google this because I'm not super familiar with a seatbelt assembly. This is considered the buckle. This is the part that everybody sees in their vehicle. This bottom portion is what is in between the center console and the seat and not exposed when a person is sitting in the vehicle.
So if I'm driving, is this going to be on my right side?
It should be on your right side, yes.
Okay. And what is this?
So if we start here, the next part that everybody's familiar with is the latch plate, which goes into the buckle. And then there's an entire belt that goes into the retractor wheel.
Can you
And
pull that? Let's pull it. Don't let it go.
I got it.
Where did y'all attempt, you and Ms. Hall attempt to get particle lifts?
So we stretched it out as far as it would go, and we took samples, 3 samples from the belt, front or both sides, and we just divided it into 3 sections and took samples from those 3 sections.
And this was an abnormal item that you assisted Ms. Hall with?
Yes, sir.
Will you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the results of your examination, if any?
Yes, sir. 1 particle characteristic of gunshot primer residue was found. In general, particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue are microscopic molten particles that contain the elements lead, barium, and antimony. Gunshot primer residue can come from being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm or coming into contact with a surface that has gunshot primer residue on it. However, no information can be provided as to the time frame in which this particle was deposited.
So in common sense term, how could that get on the seatbelt? Where did you actually find the particle?
The particle was located on the particle lift collected from the buckle. So that piece with the red button.
just in common sense, in your expert opinion, how could that particle get on that bucket?
It could be from touching something that has gunshot primer residue on it, or possibly being in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm.
So it could be a transfer.
It's probably most likely a transfer, yes, sir.
Say, why is it probably most likely a transfer?
It's just usually not exposed to the vicinity. If there isn't a gunshot out of that vehicle, then transfer is the most likely scenario.
Just makes sense, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, you submitted another potential piece of evidence in this case, forensic
Yes.
scientist Megan Fletcher.
Yes, sir, I was.
And what was that?
This was a blue rain jacket, kind of poncho type jacket.
Do you know when I guess when that came into your custody, when you looked at it the first time?
October 5th, 2021.
Of course. States 439.
Excuse me, Your Honor, we renew our earlier objection to this evidence under 403, but we don't have any additional objections.
Yes, sir, submitted.
I first want to show you, I don't know if I'm going to use that element or not yet, but just showing what's 430 right now. Is that what you examined?
Those are images of what I examined, yes.
Images of what you examined.
Yes, sir.
And tell the folks where you conducted this examination specifically.
I conducted this examination in the trace evidence laboratory.
In the trace laboratory.
Yes, sir.
And I first noticed there's a well, states 430. It appears that the well, let me put this on down. It looks like it's on a table or something.
It's actually on two tables. It was large enough in order for us to be able to lay it out. We had to put two tables together.
Large enough you had to put two tables together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And why is it on this white? What's it on? What's underneath?
Underneath it is butcher paper, and that's used to protect the item of evidence, but also used to collect any trace evidence that may need to be examined.
And it looks like on the right, there may be a ruler or a measurement.
Yes, it was just a sticker with ruler on it just to help guide us with the general size of it. We didn't take any specific measurements of anything.
But is it fair to say that that's how it looked when you saw it in October?
Yes, sir, it is.
October 8th?
October 5th.
5th, excuse me, of 21. This report was dated October 8th. I apologize. You're with Ms. Hall. You had your jacket on, your gloves on, your mask on?
Yes, sir.
And tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, did it take two of you to do this?
Yes, sir, it did.
Why?
So I gave Jamie Hall direct instructions on where to collect from, and while she was doing that, I was taking the notes.
Double teaming it.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to try not to get the question. I apologize, but 226. Is that what's depicted
look at them. This jacket is the jacket I examined. My lab number, the item number 173, my initials, and the date in which we examined it is on there.
And is this the same picture of what we just showed, 430, I think?
It's the same image that you just, or this is the jacket that was in the image you just showed.
Okay, and I'm gonna get this away. I don't want to bother any of the jurors, so I'll get this away here. So you and Ms. Hall lay this out to examine it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how did you determine specifically where you were going to check to see if there were any particles?
So typically when we're looking for gunshot primer residue, we're looking for somebody who was in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm. For this particular case, we were provided information that something might have been transferred in this item that had gunshot primer residue on it. Therefore, we treated it like an item that needed to be checked for transfer. Therefore, we had to collect particle lifts from the entirety of the item, including the interior.
You can either do it from up there or down here. How did you do it? How did you do it? What'd you start with? Collecting potential particle lifts or particle lifts.
So in total, we collected 25 particle lifts from the jacket. When I say we covered everything, we covered everything. We collected from the exterior of the hood, the right sleeve, the left sleeve, the right chest, the left chest. There's a middle pocket on the jacket. So we collected the whole middle section, including the pocket. The pocket also has like a hand warmer section. It's got a little bit of fleece inside. We collected from inside of that. And then we split the bottom half in two, collected one particle lift from the right side and one from the left. We then flipped the jacket over and took one particle lift from the right sleeve into the right back on the top of the jacket, the left sleeve into the back on the top of the jacket. Let me check this real quick. The back sample, the lower half was again split in half, and the right side was collected as well as the left side.
Be a little, you said 25. Were there a total of 52 particle lifts?
There were a total of 25 particle lifts.
How many on the outside?
How many particle lifts?
Yes, specifically, please.
Uh, $13.
Can you tell us now where they were?
Where the
Particle lists? Yes. Where did you swab specifically?
The outside of the hood.
Lifts, not swab. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
The outside of the hood, the front right sleeve, the front right chest, the front left sleeve, the front left chest, the middle pocket area, the interior of the pocket area, like a hand warmer section. The bottom half of the coat was split into two, so the bottom right side and the bottom left side. The coat was flipped over and the sleeve and top half of the jacket on the right side was collected. The sleeve and top half of the jacket on the left side was collected. And then the bottom half, the right side was collected and the left side was collected.
So you mentioned the pockets in here. Did you find anything inside these pockets? Warmers, where you put your hands, if you will.
As far as particles of gunshot primer residue?
Yes.
No particles were detected inside that pocket there. None.
But you checked.
We did check.
Okay. And the particle lists on the outside of the jacket were how many?
A total of particle lifts,
Yes.
13, I believe.
Okay. And what does that tell you as, in your opinion, as an expert in the field of gunshot residue?
Oh, are you asking the number of particles of gunshot primer residue or particle lifts?
Particle list and then your findings.
Okay, there were 13 particle lifts collected from the exterior of the jacket, and I did find particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue on it.
Now, what does that mean?
that jacket could have been in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, or something that had gunshot residue on it could have transferred to that object. I can't tell you when that happened or how it happened.
And how many, again, inside the pockets, you found no gunshot residue?
That's correct.
Why, you said, you flipped it over and checked the inside?
Yes, we turned it inside out and also collected samples from the inside.
Have you done that before?
I don't believe I've done an interior unless it was explicitly stated that somebody was wearing a shirt or a coat inside out.
So you actually turned it inside out?
Correct.
And tell them what you and Ms. Hall did.
So once we turned it inside out, we collected particle lifts from the front and the back again. So the inside of the hood, the right sleeve to, you can see seam tape on this. It's that clear stuff that's kind of falling apart off of the jacket. So we used that as kind of a guide for us. So we used the front right sleeve to the center section of the coat, the left front sleeve to the center section of the coat, the middle area directly behind the pocket, the right and the left side on the bottom half of the jacket. We turned it over again and did the right sleeve to the center point on the top of the jacket, the left sleeve to the center point on the top of the jacket, split the bottom in half again, did the right bottom half of the jacket and left bottom half of the jacket.
And what, after your examination, what were your results?
Particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue were also found on the interior of this jacket.
Is there a certain number or could you have kept checking and checking? Was there a lot of gunshot primer residue inside of the jacket?
I would say there were a significant number of particles characteristic of gunshot primer residue on the inside of this jacket, yes.
How many did you determine?
I confirmed 38 particles characteristic.
And I'm saying determined, confirmed. You confirmed how many?
38.
38.
Yes, sir.
From the inside of the rain jacket, poncho,
Yes, sir.
whatever this is, correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you, and you taught me a word too, is there something that kind of led you, there could have been more, but you just basically stopped checking?
So if we go back to when I talked about the automated analysis, it gives me a list of candidate features that may contain lead, barium, and antimony. There were significantly more particles were listed as candidate features containing the elements lead, barium, and antimony. I had to make an analyst decision based on my experience to stop at the number that I did.
Candidate features,
Yes, sir.
which meant if you went on, you would expect to find more gunshot primer residue, correct?
It could. I would have had to still check the morphology. I would have had to make sure that they were molten around. I also would have had to check that they didn't contain exclusionary elements like high amounts of iron and magnesium. But there was a possibility that there would have been more on it.
But you found 38
I confirmed 38, yes, sir.
and 23 candidate features if you'd gone further, correct?
More than 23.
More than 23?
Yes, sir.
Did there come a point, if you had finished that examination, how long would it have taken you if you had checked everything?
If I had checked every single particle, it probably would have taken me a week.
So is there a percentage that you determine, hey, I'm going to stop at this point and say, here are my results? There's some other candidate features. Is there a guideline out there?
We don't have a specific guideline. It really is based on our experience. And for this particular case, I stopped anywhere between 10 and 20%. Some areas I was able to do a full 100% because there weren't that many to go look at. But other areas, I did have to make a determination
Of when to stop?
of when to stop. Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you look at the ladies and gentlemen of this jury and tell them in your opinion, your expert opinion, how that number of particles of gunshot residue primer, what is that consistent with?
If somebody was wearing this coat inside out, I would say that it's consistent with being in the vicinity to the discharge of a shooting. Given that it's on the inside in order for it to be consistent with transfer, an object or objects with a high amount of gunshot primer residue on it would have had to transfer to it. So they would have had to have more gunshot primer residue particles on them to begin with in order to transfer the amount of gunshot primer residue I found on this coat.
And as far as a recently fired firearm, would your findings be consistent with that item containing a recently fired firearm?
It is possible, yes.
With that number of particles?
With that number, it is possible.
Is there any other possibility? You
If
stated one. Are there any more?
if the jacket was inside out and simply in the vicinity to the discharge of a firearm, it could have also had that number of particles on it.
In your opinion, and just life in the job you love, that's a large number of particles, isn't it?
It was a significant amount of particles, yes, sir.
On the inside of the jacket.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not doing this but just to show. I'm almost 6 feet. I am 6 feet, a little over 6 feet on the rector reflector. But anyway. This doesn't look like a full length garment to you.
I would say that it would fit most people down to their knees or so.
Big course indulgence. Just in conclusion again, as far as the hood, you said there was one particle outside the hood?
Yes, sir. I was able to confirm one particle on the exterior of the hood.
And how many particles on the inside of the hood did you determine there were?
3 particles were confirmed on the inside.
Inside of the hood?
Yes, sir.
And finally, since this is an inanimate object, how long would you expect that gunshot primer residue to stay on there?
Until it's actively removed.
Say that again, for what?
Until it's actively removed.
That means washed, cleaned,
Uh,
whatever.
Yeah, brushing it, like aggressively brushing it off, washing it in a washing machine, cleaned, hosed off, something like that.
If a recently fired firearm was wrapped up inside that jacket, would that be consistent with your findings?
There is a possibility of that, yes, sir.
Thank you very much. That's all we have. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to adjourn for the day and resume at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Please do not discuss the case. Have a good evening.
Well, I wonder if there was a gun on the inside of that. Or was he wearing it? I don't know. Did he wear it inside out for? I don't know. Damn. Well, another full day tomorrow by the looks of it. Everybody's coming in. It's going to be 7:30 Mountain Standard. So I will set up for that. And there's also a possibility that I will not be going on until the afternoon. We're going to play it by ear, see how everything goes. So I appreciate you very much, friends. Thanks again for spending the time with me. And I will absolutely see you in the next one. Bye.